This was Jesus' hometown after he left Nazareth. Now, of course, he comes down here. Ronnie's explained a bit about that. He's going to explain more, so I'm not going to go into the details on quite how he ended up here. But this was the center of his Galilean ministry. This synagogue is Byzantine. That means it's late Roman. If you still haven't figured out what Byzantine means, it simply means that it's after Constantine the Great converted to Christianity, and then it entered the Christian era when Christianity was legalized. About 70 years later it was mandated, and that's when real tragedy hit the church, actually. But needless to say, this is a Byzantine synagogue. You say, well, what about Jesus' real synagogue? It's right underneath your feet, about 3 feet. That pit over there is part of the archaeology when they put this back together again. I've got pictures of this 100 years ago. It was just pieces of limestone sticking up out of the ground. It was complete rubble at the time. But when they put it back where they knew that it actually went. They found parts of it, and they found the foundation of an older synagogue, first century synagogue, only the foundation. That was right here. So if you want to know, did the Bible happen here? Yes, about 3 feet under your feet, right in this area. So what did Jesus do here? Well, I had to make a list, and I got to read it for you because, first of all, let me tell you what he did close to here. Not too far away, within a mile or two, maybe 3 at the most in some cases. But just on the other side of the Jordan, that way. Some will say it was over here. It was definitely over there because the Bible tells us it was over there, near a city that Jesus cursed called Bethsaida. Not Bethesda, Bethsaida. Now we're not going to visit it because it's just a pile of rocks, okay? There's really nothing to see because when Jesus curses something, it's cursed, okay? He cursed this town too. What do you see? Ruins. And the Millennium Falcon right over there. But that church, it looks like something out of Star Wars, you know? But right over there, Jesus fed 5,000. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. He healed the dead daughter of Jairus, raised her from the dead. He healed a nobleman's son, which was a Herodian. These were the bad guys in those days to the people of Galilee. Jesus healed the bad guy's son. I like that. It's kind of, oh yeah, amen. Where would we be if he didn't do something like that, right? He healed a centurion's servant who was associated with this town. He healed a paralyzed man let down through the roof of a house, which may be the building that's underneath that church. The reason the church is off the ground is it's built over a set of ruins that many believe to be the house of Peter's mother-in-law. So that might be the actual place. Who knows, but there's some very interesting evidence that actually makes you think it might be. Right off the shore here, and when we're done with the synagogue here and we start moving that direction, we'll eventually end out by the shore. I want to show you something out there. There was a miraculous catch of fish. And also when Peter, of course, opened his mouth at the wrong time and said, well, should we pay this tax? And Peter says, yeah. And Jesus says, what are you talking about? And of course, you probably know the story. Go down to the water, throw in your line and pull out a fish. You'll find, a coin to pay the temple tax. And of course, it happened right over here, just on that end of the shore. What happened right here? Well, 3 feet under your feet, you've got an incident over in Mark where Jesus cast the demon out of a man who was brought in here, where he healed many other people and cast out demons when all the city was gathered at the door. Now, this isn't the same synagogue, remember, but it was like this, similar to this, probably made out of black basalt and probably plastered over in white and whatever other colors they wanted to add to it. But you can imagine this place being jammed full of people and Jesus being in an area somewhere around here where he would read, he would speak, he would sit when he taught, and everybody else stood. This is their way of doing things back then. But this is what happened in the synagogue. And one more thing happened here that I want to kind of tell you about. Some of you know this, I know, but really, as Americans, we're just oblivious to this. About 2/3 of the world to this day, and the entire world, up to about 200 years ago, did everything with their right hand. If you were left-handed, there was something wrong with you. If you were left-handed, they made you become right-handed. Now, in the Bible, we have some notable left-handed people, one of whom is one of the judges of Israel, a man named Ehud, who assassinated a Moabite king named Eglon. And he was a left-handed man, the Bible tells us, because he was able to hide a sword on his right hip. Nobody ever patted down the right side of your body because everybody was right-handed. You would draw your sword off of your left hip. So they patted down his left hip. They didn't pat down his right hip. He goes in to see King Eglon, pulls the sword off his right hip, and stabs him and kills him. So a notable left-handed man. And there was a whole team of left-handed guys who, threw the little rocks with the slings and all of that. They had a whole bunch of left-handed men that did that too. But the reason why the world decided to be right-handed, and even if you're left-handed, you had to be right-handed, is because this hand, the left hand, in the days of no toilet paper, you get it, right? To this day, it's the same thing in 2/3 of the world right now. The same thing. It's why we shake with our right hand. We say, well, the right hand's the sword hand. That's a British thing. It's not a world thing. We shake hands with our right hand because we know, even if your left hand is clean, we know where that hand has been. So we shake with our right hands because that's a way to honor the person that you're greeting. Then that's our Western ways. In ancient times, you did everything with your right hand. You ate with your right hand. If you touched food with your left hand, with the exception of one item of food, which I'll get to later, but if you touched any food with your left hand, even brushed against it, if I were your host and you were eating at my house, I would discreetly, so as not to shame you, have that food removed because you had defiled it. Now that brings up a very interesting situation. A man, and you've heard this story, but let me tell you what the people that were here saw. Remember, we want to look at the Bible through that peasant's mindset. So let me tell you what they saw and what they thought. Jesus is in this synagogue on the Sabbath. He's about to teach. He would be somewhere in this area here, presumably, because we don't know the exact layout of the foundations, but as far as where the center would have been, but it's over here somewhere. And he would have been here. And the Pharisees, the good old Pharisees, trying to trap Jesus, to make him into a lawbreaker in front of all the people, which would discredit him completely, bring in through that door a man with a withered right hand. At least that's what Luke tells us. He's the one who gives us the detail. It wasn't just a man with a withered hand, he had a withered right hand. Now that simply means what you think it means. His hand is paralyzed for some reason. Maybe it was a stroke, an accident, maybe he was born that way. Either way, the musculature has withered away, the tendons have tightened up, his hand is paralyzed and hangs limply at his right side. And he's brought in on the Sabbath so that the Pharisees could see if Jesus was going to heal on the Sabbath, because you're not supposed to do things like that on the Sabbath. They said, they didn't realize they were talking to the Lord of the Sabbath. He doesn't change the rules. He tells you this is what I intended when I made them. And you find that Jesus' ministry, even in this, is a ministry of reconciliation. Reconciliation to God, but reconciliation to others, to one another, and to others. How so? What am I getting at? You come on in with this man. Here comes the Pharisees, and this man comes in with his hand dangling it right here. We're not talking Sunday school. We're talking here. And he comes in, and Jesus saw the man, knew what was going on, but had compassion on the man anyway. He was part of a plot, and it was a vicious plot to discredit Jesus and ruin his ministry. And he sees the man, and he doesn't say, you're part of this, everybody out. He looks at the man and he says, stretch out your hand. Now, if I were that man, I would have probably lacked a little bit of faith, and I would have gone with my left hand, He knew. And he stretched out his right hand, and it's completely healed. It's completely healed. The muscles come back, the tendons loosen up, the life comes back in his hand. He can move his right hand again. He's normal, he's fine, he can move his hand. And Jesus restored that man to health. He healed him. And he did an awful lot more than that. He restored that man to his family, to his friends, and to the community. Because until he could eat with his right hand, nobody would let him eat with them. And that is social ostracization. He was out there. We don't even know if he was a beggar or not, but he couldn't even eat with his own family unless they physically fed him with their own hands, so he wouldn't defile the food with his left. That's how thoroughly Jesus restores people. When he heals us, it's not just to heal our bodies. He's doing something else too. Something else that points to the Father, something else that points to him, that says this is the man who brings people together. People together with God and people together with each other. And that's what he did when he healed that man's hand. Isn't that amazing? And it happened right here. And a lot more. Now we're going to talk about some more when we leave here, because there's not a lot of people in here, but we can't sit here all day. So I want to show you something, and we're going to move, like everybody to get up, we're going to move over right in front of these two columns right over here. So would you come with me for just a second? Follow me right over here. Now, I told you yesterday something that some of you might have thought, well, okay, maybe I don't get it, but I said that even the book of Revelation was understandable by peasants. Remember, the book of Revelation is a revealing. It's not a hiding. The problem is with us. The problem isn't with the content. And yeah, there are some things in the book of Revelation that are still a little mysterious, but as you'll see when we get to the Mount of Beatitudes, which is our next stop, that I'm going to talk about how these people related to some of the things that Jesus said very concretely. One of those things in the book of Revelation, remember John is a Galilean, very concrete thinker, and so when Jesus gave him the book of Revelation, he relates everything in the book of Revelation in a very concrete manner that even a child could accept and understand. There's a lot of idioms in there, and the idioms are very, very simple. They're like local proverbs and things, and lots of scriptures that Jews know because there were a lot of Jews back then. But in the book of Revelation, there's this one mysterious passage that I've heard dozens of sermons on. I've even taught them until I learned this, because all that people do is guess at it. It happens to be over in Revelation chapter 3, verse 12. It's at the end of Jesus' letter to the church of the Philadelphians, which is over in Turkey, by the way. He says, "Him who overcomes," talking to the church, which was under duress, he said, "I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches." You're looking at just such a thing right here. This happens to be in a synagogue. But it happens to be also in any pagan temple of that time, also in administrative buildings and great structures of that day, that if you had done something wonderful, heroic, or in any other way benefiting the larger community, and the people looked upon you as someone who really had done some tremendous things, that you met the approval of the king or the magistrate or the governor or whoever was in charge, they would, to honor you, carve your name in a column or a pillar and say what it is that you did. They would carve the name of the city in which you did it, presumably the city there, because it immortalizes your name, and it would stay on a column like this in a temple or in an administrative building or even in a synagogue. When Jesus says, "This is what I will do," he's not throwing out abstractions and saying, well, it's going to be like that. He's saying, hey, you guys know what your temples are like? Yes. You know what the synagogues are like? Yes. You know what the administrative buildings are like? Yes. You know those plaques that they have up there that immortalize these people? Oh yeah, they're important people. They're people that have done tremendously wonderful things, that met the approval of the highest authority. Yeah, I'm going to do that with you in my God's temple, my Father's house. I'm going to inscribe your name on a column, and you're going to be just like that column. You'll stand in the presence of God, and people will come and they will read off of that. Here's what they did for me and for everyone. Now you understand part of the book of Revelation from something like this. I don't know what these say. There's something around here that probably tells us. But they're dedications for the people who actually helped put the money forth to put to restore the synagogue. I'm not sure about this one. Obviously, I can't read that. But it's the same thing. This is exactly what's going on. And this has been going on for thousands of years. And when Jesus points it out to the Philadelphians, they probably breathed a big sigh of relief, because they were the church that was facing excommunication and rejection from a group of people who claimed to be very, very devout Jews. And Jesus says, I don't even consider them Jews based on what they're doing to you. You are my people, and nobody can shut you out of heaven. In fact, with that, I said, I'll put their name in the columns there in my Father's house. You will never be forgotten. You're safe.